Join me now, representing Georgia's 10th Congressional District, Congressman Jody Hice. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me. Congressman, we heard Congresswoman AOC calling this all hysteria when you focus in on the crime surge that's happening in cities across the country, mostly run by Democrats. What say you?
Yeah, well, listen, if you're living in the midst of high crime, you're living in the midst of hysteria yourself. You're scared to go out of your home. This is a crime crisis that, again, has been created by Democrats, defunding the police, going after law enforcement all across the country, turning an eye to riots that were taking place all across our country. They've been doing this for over a year now, and we are watching the consequences of those horrible decisions from Democrats in blue states and blue cities all across this country, surging crime in every area. And it's 100% on the back of Democrats.
When she calls it hysteria, it's very reckless and it's dangerous because it's very misleading, especially to those people who are living in these cities where there has been an extreme crime surge. Why do you think she would try to blur this and confuse people on what's actually going on and the reality of what's happening?
Yeah, what she's trying to do is blame others for highlighting the problem, and she's saying that if we bring it to light, that it is somehow going to be throwing gas into the fire and creating hysteria. The fact is, there's already a serious problem that needs to be addressed, and it's a problem that exists because there's been an effort to defund the police, to attack law enforcement, and now we're watching the consequences of it. So she's trying to pass the buck. She's trying to deflect the reality of the crisis that she and others in the Democratic Party have created.
Yeah, I wanted to just cover a couple numbers really quickly for our audience so they know how bad the situation is. Homicides in New York, just from this time since last year, went up 13%, shootings 64%. In Portland, homicides went up 533%. And like our audience just heard right, 533%. And their shootings went up 126%. Chicago, homicides up 5%, shootings up 18%. And that was already Chicago. And we know the numbers are astounding out there. This is something that I've covered when talking about news for years. Doesn't get a lot of attention because it doesn't fit the left's narrative about anything.
You're exactly right. They've been, like I said, they've been turning a blind eye for a year while riots have been taking place. We've watched businesses burned down, lives threatened, law enforcement attacked. Over 2,000 law enforcement have been injured seriously over the past year. Democrats did nothing. They said nothing. They turned the other way. And now it's coming back to haunt them. Look, we are a country of law and order. We've got to get back to law and order, and part of law and order is law enforcement. And you cannot attack law enforcement and expect crime to go down. AOC just the other day, wasn't it? She made some comment that we would have less crime if we had fewer jails. I mean, come on. None of this makes sense. Yeah. Law enforcement is necessary for the rule of law to be a part of a civil society, and you remove the law and order and you get exactly what we're seeing in many of these large cities.
Yeah, and what's the step to tackle this? Obviously, states and cities will have to take matters into their own hands, and we've seen some of the cities that did defund the police that were okay with all of the vitriol and rhetoric against law enforcement, and we see the consequences going on there. But is there anything that Congress or Republicans can do at the federal level?
You know, listen, what the Democrats are trying to do is attack gun rights, of course. They're attempting that. But no, listen, what we've got to do is encourage law enforcement. I have a bill right now, just for example, to refund and to increase the salary for park police, for example. The only way that you counter the defund police movement is to support law enforcement in every way. And one of the areas that personally I have seen there's a huge disparity in is the park police are paid much less and they have much fewer benefits than other law enforcement. And so I put forth a bill to encourage them to have better pay and benefits. So listen, you counter defunding the police by supporting our law enforcement. I believe Congress has a role in that regard. but we have got to get behind our law enforcement. The incredible job they do sacrificially in behalf of all of us every day is something that we need to support in every city and community and state across this country.
Yeah, well, and as we know, we've seen a lot of retirements when it comes to policing and law enforcement, and then it's going to be tough to recruit people because the way the media and leftists portray police officers, they call them racist and all these other things. Like, who would want to grow up and be a police officer if they're constantly being bombarded with all of this messaging that law enforcement's bad and police officers are no good? So that's another issue for another day. Now, I wanted to switch gears here and ask you about the latest. Apparently, everything's racist, according to the left, but now the rotunda is racist, and this is according to the National Archives Racism Task Force. I didn't even know that existed. That was news to me this week.
Yeah, I think it was news to a lot of us. Of course, what is the purpose of our National Archives but to preserve history and not to rewrite it? And now we're watching this task force come forward with an attempt to rewrite our history. And look, our founding fathers gave us a Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, dreams, aspirations, principles that have led us as a country to become more conscious and more effective overall of providing equality and justice for all. And to attack those founding documents as somehow being racist, it is the principles within those documents that have led us to deal with racism. And this is a time for us to celebrate the content of those documents and to continue trying to embrace them and live them out as a part of our belief system in this country rather than attack them.
Yeah. So this task force latest report was critical of the founding fathers, and then they claimed that the rotunda, which houses the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, is an example of structural racism. That is because it allows wealthy white men in the nation's founding while marginalizing Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, women, and communities.
Yeah, that's just very offensive, not to mention wrong. It is the principles that are found in those documents that have created an environment for us in a country to deal with racism, to deal with slavery, to have a civil war in order to abolish slavery. All those things came about because we have those founding documents that stress the importance and the belief of equality and justice for all. And yes, we're not a perfect country by any means, and we've got a long ways to go, but we've come a long ways, and we need to embrace the principles upon which we were founded and not trash them and try to rewrite them.
Yeah, and I don't understand why all the focus in this. Like, they're looking for racism everywhere they can try to find it. And number one, it waters down real racism. And number two, it's not going to unite us. How is this helpful for the conversation? As you pointed out, America, we don't have a perfect history, a perfect past. No country does. But they seem to be zeroing in on this, and it seems obviously politically motivated.
It is politically motivated, and unfortunately, we're seeing this woke culture, a cancel culture movement trying to erase, rewrite our history, and that would be among the worst things that can happen in our country. We are a country that unites around certain principles, certain beliefs, certain aspirations that we all cherish and embrace. And for us to be living in a time where the tail is wagging the dog, and the tail being a group of people who want to eradicate our history and change our future in socialist Marxist type ideology is something we cannot tolerate. We've got to come back and unify around those things that have distinguished this country from every other country in the world. And those are the principles found in these founding documents.
Well said, Congressman. We appreciate you joining us on the show. Thank you so much.